All right, folks, this is Kenny with Just the Right Angle. I am here at the Arkansas State Capitol where they're going to do a huge press conference regarding the attempt by a federal judge to block the Ten Commandments. There's been God haters here for a long time. Y'all like and share this as best you can. I'm going to have to step out and deal with something else. Okay, folks, well, I got to step out. I won't be able to say much anyway, but you'll be able to share this and folks, but I do got to step out.
Yeah.
I'm all right. All right, good morning, everybody. We are here today to talk about Act 573, the Ten Commandments Act for the state of Arkansas. And my name is Senator Jim Dotson. I was the lead sponsor on the legislation that puts this Ten Commandments on the walls of public buildings and institutions in the state of Arkansas. We have a lot of excitement about this, and so I want to get everybody together, kind of in a room. The law is now in effect as of August the 5th, and we'll probably take some questions at the end, but now I want to turn it over to Representative Brown, who is the lead House sponsor in that. We'll kind of go on down the road.
Thank you, Senator Dotson. Thank y'all for being here. Part of the reason why we wanted this press conference is there's a lot of conversation around this law that we overwhelmingly passed here in the legislature. And I'll repeat something briefly that I repeated on the House floor on April 12th. I think around 8:45, my House colleagues, it was a long night for us when I presented this bill on the House floor, but I quoted to my colleagues then, and I'll echo it to Arkansans today, that you cannot separate the history of our nation and the founding of our law and justice system from the Ten Commandments. We send our kids to DC to go learn about the history of our nation, where they will go to places like the National Archives, or the House floor there in the Capitol, or even the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in our land. In each of those places, they will see depictions of the Ten Commandments. And so we stand behind this law that we passed in the legislature. We believe that it will be upheld in a court or higher court. And an Obama-appointed judge's ruling on that does not change the truth that American history and that its founding of our law shows that the Ten Commandments is a part of that. And so I'm not the historian here today. I'm honored to be a representative that was a part of this, but we do have a great historian here, and that is David Barton from Wall Builders. I'd love to introduce him up here to come and share with y'all today.
Thank you, Representative Brown, Senator. One of the things that made this bill possible is something the Supreme Court did in 2019. In that case, in what was called the Bladensburg Cross case, they talked about how that they were heading in a new direction, returning to what they called history and tradition. And they said that if something can be shown to be historical and traditional, it bears the assumption of constitutionality. And that was a shift from what they'd been the previous 3 to 4 decades. And so on history and tradition, when you look at the Ten Commandments, there's very little in America that is more historical and traditional than the Ten Commandments. The very first textbook published in American schools was in 1690, the New England Primer. It was the first grade textbook, and in that first grade textbook, it starts with 40 questions on the Ten Commandments. And so that's what we had in first grade, was 40 questions on the Ten Commandments, and that book was used through the 1920s and 1930s. But so many other books picked it up. If you go to McGuffey Readers and Noah Webster's book, the Ten Commandments are part of education throughout that period of time. So we have this long history and tradition of that having been part of education. It was also part, as Representative Brown mentioned, even the culture. We take 8th grade trips to Washington, D.C. on a regular basis to see Washington, D.C. And if you go in the Supreme Court, there are numerous depictions of the Ten Commandments inside the U.S. Supreme Court. If you walk out the Supreme Court and turn left, you go to the Library of Congress and you walk in. There's this massive statue of Moses holding the Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments are also at other locations in the Library of Congress. And then if you go across the street to the U.S. Congress, there in the House chamber you have Moses, but also outside the door going into the House chamber you have the Ten Commandments. And then if you go further down the street to the National Archives, as you approach the Constitution Declaration, you see the originals. Right there in the floor is the depiction of the Ten Commandments right there between the Constitution and the Declaration. And if you go to the Ronald Reagan Transportation Building outside, engraved in stone, Ten Commandments, you go all over these. So we're going to start canceling trips to D.C. now because students might see the Ten Commandments. This has been part of history and tradition for a long time in America. The lawsuit that happened here was not a surprise, knew that would be coming, but also knew that with what the Supreme Court had given us in 2019, that there's really firm footing on this because this is something that has a long-standing historical tradition in America, and that's teaching the Ten Commandments to students. So this has been key for so much of our history and just returning to really what has worked in previous generations.
Thank you, David. Wanted to also not forget to mention all of my colleagues in the legislature, both House members and senators that are here today that support this law and voted for it and helped us get it through the legislature. Not to forget, we talk a lot about the schools, and but there is a lot of effort going into the law. Doesn't just cover schools; it's any taxpayer-funded building in the state of Arkansas. And I want to introduce Glenn Story from Patriot Mobile, who has been a large contributor to help get some of these printed, the posters printed, and let him speak for a few minutes, and then we'll have a presentation.
Well, that presentation will be a lot better than what I have to say. Anyway, my name is Glenn Story. I'm the founder and CEO of Patriot Mobile. You may wonder why we're here. Well, you know what? I'll explain Patriot Mobile a little bit. We're a very God-centered cell phone service provider. We're based in the U.S., and what really separates us, not only that God runs our business, we live by biblical principles, we carve out a portion of every cell phone bill and donate back to biblical causes. In particular, First Amendment, Second Amendment, right to life, military and first responders. And how this dovetails into what we're doing, we really believe that the Ten Commandments has been not only a part of our tradition and history, but but it also formed who we are as a country, right? You look at our Constitution and those principles, and I've had a father that fought in World War II for that very Constitution. So, you know, it's really honors me to be here among such great politicians and people that really care about their state. And I think as Patriot Mobile, we want to donate to Cole, the great state of Arkansas, the Secretary of State. We're going to donate some 10 Commandments. So. All right, well, thank you and have a blessed day.
All right, and to kind of address the elephant in the room, there has been a lawsuit that was filed against this. There was a court decision that was made. We're obviously in disagreement with the ruling of the judge at the district level, but that will be appealed. And to kind of talk a little bit more about that aspect of things, we've got some attorneys here from First Liberty. Jeremy.
Thank you. Yeah, Jeremy Dice from First Liberty Institute. I'm senior counsel, and David went into a little bit of detail about the case called Bladesburg. Actually, that's the name of the town in which the monuments stand, and stood there for 95 years without any kind of contest. That was erected by the American Legion right after World War I. One mother said, "I can't visit my son's grave overseas. He fought and died in Europe." She couldn't just hop in a plane and go across the Atlantic to visit her son's grave. She viewed that cross-shaped Veterans Memorial as her son's gravestone. That's why they built that memorial right there in Bladesburg. But suddenly, after 95 years, someone became offended at the sight of that Veterans Memorial on public property. And they did, I guess, what a lot of Americans do. They sued over it. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court. We had the privilege at First Liberty Institute of representing the American Legion as our clients at the Supreme Court of the United States. And that case came out in an incredible way, because what stood at stake in that case was not just that Veterans Memorial, as important as that World War I Veterans Memorial to 49 men from Prince George's County was. What was important was all the other monuments, memorials, displays of the Ten Commandments, things like this throughout all American society. What was going to happen if the Supreme Court decided to tear down that Veterans Memorial? But the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to unleash a bulldozer from Bladesburg, Maryland, to run roughshod across this country, knocking down Veterans Memorials, Stars of David, Ten Commandments displays, and the like. Instead, we're going to afford these Veterans Memorials, these displays of the Ten Commandments and things like it, with, and I'm quoting from the opinion, a presumption of constitutionality. In other words, the burden of proof is no longer upon those who have erected these memorials or who put these displays up in courthouses and courthouse squares. The burden of proof now rests upon those who would take it down to show how it is out of step and out of keeping with American history, with our tradition as a country. But this judge, unfortunately, has gotten that backwards. In fact, you read through the judge's opinion, and I want to be careful with my criticism of the judge, but nonetheless, he does not cite the Bladesburg decision one time. American Legion does not come up in this case whatsoever. And instead of putting the burden of proof upon those who are now offended at the presence of Ten Commandments within our schools or our government buildings, he's put the burden of proof upon those who would want to put it up. Exactly backwards from where the Supreme Court has said that he's supposed to be going. Now look, you can talk about the Ten Commandments, monuments, and displays, these posters, and they have different meanings to different people. In fact, the Supreme Court addressed this as well in the American Legion case. And they said, look, back in the 1940s and 50s, there was a movement by the Fraternal Order of the Eagles to put Ten Commandments monuments up around the country. And they had a certain motivation for wanting to do so. There's this other guy named Cecil B. DeMille, who also wanted to do something with the Ten Commandments. And he had a whole different idea behind it, because he had Charlton Heston to make sure he got paid for the movie to the Ten Commandments. But he partnered with the Fraternal Order of the Eagles, and what the Supreme Court has said is that, look, that's just fine. In a pluralistic society such as ours, we're going to have different emphases, we're going to have different reasons for wanting to support things, and that's okay. In our country, we're going to tolerate this religious diversity as a nation. But instead of tolerating a display like the Ten Commandments here in our schools and our public buildings, the decision now has been made by at least one judge to take these out for the schools in the state of Arkansas. And that, in fact, is a sad thing. Now, I'm hopeful that the state of Arkansas will be appealing this. I hear that they will. First Liberty Institute stands ready to help them in whatever way we possibly can, whether that is litigating side by side with them or filling in as an amicus brief or whatever way we can support them. Because the Supreme Court meant what it said when it said that these types of displays, imbued with the meaning that they have and possess over many, many, many years, become a part of our cultural tradition, and they deserve the presumption of constitutionality.
Thank you, Jeremy. I don't know that I can add any more to that, so we'll open it up for a couple of questions. If anyone from the media has a question.
Yeah, I'll go first. I got a couple questions for you, Senator. First of all, what is your response to Judge Brooks's, criticism of the bill when he says that the bill, along with other similar states that have similar legislation, some of which have been blocked, some of which are still going on, that it is a coordinated strategy to inject Christian religious doctrine into public schools. That's one of the criticisms that he hurled at you guys. What is your response to that?
Well, like he disagrees with me, I disagree with him. And so we've clearly demonstrated, I think anyway, that this is about the histories and traditions of the United States, and the Ten Commandments plays an important role in that. And so the fact that our education system in the last 30, 40, 50 years has not properly educated a federal judge to know what the history and traditions of our country is kind of concerning. And that's kind of the point and the reason to bring this law back and put it back in front of the people of the state of Arkansas, at least.
Do you have a breakdown of how many? I know Pine Bluff had said that they put up a poster. Do you have a list of other districts that have, or a list of districts that have been sent these posters?
I think there is a list of those. I don't have what the current list is. I didn't pull that this morning to find out. As far as the RestoreAmericanSchools.com, you can go to that and try to make a donation or buy the posters and get those for local areas across the state. And so at this point in time, I don't have a total number of how many have been sent out. It's only been up for a brief period of time.
Do you hope that this lawsuit will make its way to the Supreme Court?
I think the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals would probably be the next step, and hopefully we'll get a good ruling there, and then it would be dependent on anyone else to appeal from that point in time. I think eventually, depending on what the circuits decide, that's a judicial process that probably an attorney can address a little bit better than I can.
But I don't know that it needs to go to the Supreme Court. I think the court has already spoken and said that these deserve a presumption of constitutionality. They're reminding our country that in a diverse society as ours, we can certainly tolerate displays of religion wherever we want to go. But if we can't teach our children to tolerate these religious displays everywhere, whether in the public square or elsewhere, then how are they going to grow into robust citizens? And that's been language the court has used multiple times in many different briefs and cases. But let me point this out. If this case were to make it to the Supreme Court of the United States, the litigants that are going to litigate that case are going to walk up the stairs on the west side of the Supreme Court of the United States, right underneath the Ten Commandments. And as they're having arguments about whether the Ten Commandments should be displayed in a public building, the justices are going to be looking out across the gallery, and to their left will be the Ten Commandments looking down upon them as well. Should be something that is not surprising to us whatsoever. It would not be surprising in any form to our forebears. It is only in recent years where this has become something of a surprise that religion would have a place within society.
On the question about Judge Brooks and whether this is a religious doctrine, I would point to the fact that with the history and tradition test, you had the Ten Commandments in classroom for 290 years in America. They've only been out of classrooms for 45 years, and that was based on the decision in 1980, Stone v. Graham, where there was no historical precedent. The court just basically said we're going a different direction. So if you go back before 1980, you will find in the court's own records more than 300 occasions where the courts itself, state and federal, have cited the Ten Commandments as the basis of laws on everything from what they said election fraud to Oh, gracious, they went through cattle rustling, they went through white collar crime, many statutes we have, the courts took back to the Ten Commandments. So the notion that this is a religious doctrine of some type, no, it's historical, again, 290 years versus 45 years, and this is an opportunity to go back before the 45 years. And the courts itself, on 300 occasions, have cited the Ten Commandments as the basis of civil laws in America.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate this. This concludes our press conference today.
One last question. What do you tell parents like the citizens who are from a different religious beliefs, obviously, that have to send their kids? I mean, in other religious as well, I guess that was the main argument, I guess, in the plaintiffs, at least one of the main arguments, that they have to subject their kids to a certain version of the Ten Commandments that conflicts with their own. What do you tell parents like that who have to send their kids into schools where you have a bill that's going to post a certain version of the Ten Commandments that they and their kids disagree with? What do you tell them?
Well, look, I think this is going back to the educational function of the law that the Supreme Court has recognized multiple times, that if schools can't teach our children how to participate in a pluralistic society, then one wonders whether they can teach anything at all.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Look right here. Here we go. Click, click, click. Y'all hold that? Sure. All right. Last one. Click, 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 click. Hold on.
All good? Thank you all.
So you think?
So you adjusting to get to planet and we need
It's also not just scrub away face.
Well, we're not here.
So many arguments here.
And that rod.
I believe we need to do well on here, and that we have excellent counsel. That at the end of the day, the standard is to set is this. A government that goes in the place of racism is not it's awesome. Part of our life doesn't have to be under erosion. We can be proud and down and proud of this. In America, you do not have anyone else's religion. This is not what it is about at all. Instead, it's a challenge that religion is part of our faith is
Watch out, you're on the floor.
Judaism, how it's
All right, folks, this thing is over. I'll need to do some editing. I just wanted to get this real quick. What's going on? So let me get it back up here.